We begin with our breaking news. Our world is indeed changing as we speak. That smoke in the distance over Kharkiv, Ukraine.
These are among the darkest hours for Europe since the end of World War II.
It's emerging online. These pictures here show helicopters flying on the outskirts of Kiev, which is in the east of the country. Ukrainian media reporting that they belong to Russia.
Ukraine has mobilized its forces and begun to defend its cities.
Explosions heard in Kyiv, Ukraine's capital city. Just 2 hours ago, sirens going off.
And there we go. Ali, I've just heard the first siren has just gone off. And I've been told by city officials that indicates that this is a city under attack.
Ukraine's president says they've introduced martial law and have given weapons to everyone who's able to defend their country.
But he told people to stay calm, to stay in their homes.
Russia has attacked Ukraine, marking the start of a new war in Eastern Europe.
Surrounded on three sides by about 150, 170,000 troops.
And tanks roll through cities, including Sumy, heralding a new phase in this escalating crisis.
We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history.
Russian troops are attacking from the north, south, and east. It's an attack that involves artillery, tanks, and small arms.
Several videos showed what Ukrainian officials described as columns of Russian tanks entering Ukrainian territory. An unprovoked war in Europe is now underway.
Here we go.
It started before dawn. Ukraine woke to explosions around the capital, Kiev. It was the same across the country. These pictures from Kharkiv in the east. Enormous blasts, also in the city of Dnipro.
That fiction now utterly exposed. Explosions right across this vast country. In Ivano-Frankivsk, in the far southwest, a missile struck an airport.
Putin began war against Ukraine, against the entire democratic world. He wants to destroy my country, our country.
And we are here at the Antonov Airport, which is about 25 kilometers, 15 miles or so out of the center. These troops you can see over here. Stand up, Lewis. These troops you can see over here, they are Russian airborne forces. They have taken this airport.
They've obviously had a plan for weeks and they've stuck to it, but for these troops to pop up in the middle of a neighborhood where key strategic locations like airports, utilities, and paratroopers have come in. They've had one firefight, but people are driving around like it's a normal day. It's bizarre. And yet here, the Russian troops that you're seeing right there taking an airport, they've done that in several locations around the country.
Within hours, Russian tanks were reported to be on the streets of Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv.
Russia appeared to be targeting essential infrastructure, helicopter gunships hovering above a power plant. Other power stations were targeted as well, including the Chernobyl nuclear power station, raising fears of an even greater disaster.
This was an unprovoked war. It reminds me of September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland.
Russia cannot feel safe, develop, and exist with a constant threat emanating from the territory of modern Ukraine, he said, describing the government in Kiev as a junta of neo-Nazis determined to build nuclear weapons.
Mid-morning and two jets fly over the city. It's not clear whose, but it seems only a matter of time before Russia controls the air and much besides.
And demilitarization of Ukraine. I mean, judging by those words, this appears to be the worst case scenario, potentially. We have to wait and see. Not just forces moving into the east to these rebel-held areas, but potentially moving on other parts of the country. This seems to be a much larger ambition.
Russia's war machine is even hitting targets in the city capital, Kyiv.
Whoa.
Now, residents in Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Odessa heard big explosions before dawn as world leaders decried the start of the Russian invasion. It could lead to massive casualties and topple Ukraine's democratically elected government. Russian President Vladimir Putin cast aside international condemnation and sanctions, warning other countries that any attempt to interfere would lead to consequences you have never seen in history.
The invasion, the attack that Russia promised would never happen, has now started.
For the most of the day, they were fairly precise strikes on military targets, but now the Russian troops clearly are heading toward major cities. That Russian forces have been able to secure the Chernobyl area, and they are also heading toward Kharkiv, which is the biggest city in the east.
They said they hoped they were wrong, but they are clearly right tonight. The invasion started exactly as the way they predicted, with cyber attacks, with electronic warfare, and then we saw those blasts around Kyiv. But several hours before this attack began, I got a message from a senior Pentagon official who said, "You are likely in the last few hours of peace on the European continent for a long time to come."
But the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Mark Warner, is warning that Russian cyber attacks could spark a wider war across NATO.
Yeah, George, the cyber's cyber's like a wildfire. Once you start it, you can't always control it. If you remember back in 2014, when the Russians came into Ukraine, they used a bot called NotPetya, and that turned into a raging wildfire across the world, caused $10 billion worth of damage. So cyber is a concern just because you can't control it and it doesn't usually stay where you want it to, something that the U.S., the rest of the world will have to take into account as we see this evolve.
I had this very strong and very creepy sense of deja vu. I have written about Soviet invasions and Soviet occupations. I wrote a book about the Soviet occupation of Poland and East Germany and Hungary at the end of the Second World War. And so much of the tactics and methods, right up to the making lists of enemies and planning, talking about who you're going to arrest in advance, the attempt to disorient people, the use of propaganda and lies. So much of this is familiar from Soviet history. Putin is a KGB officer, and the KGB studies its own history. I mean, we know they do that because I've seen their study guides in the archives when I worked there in the 1990s. So he is really reading through, how did we do it in the past? How did we conquer other nations and occupy them in 1945? And this is very similar to that in a way that's really quite eerie.
President Putin declared war on Russian state TV, saying he intended to demilitarize Ukraine and threatened the West against interference, reminding it that Russia is a powerful nuclear state.
This is now a Cold War between the United States and all of its allies, very unified on this issue, and Russia.
Political scientist Ian Bremmer called Russia's move a turning point in global order.
What Putin is saying is that this country is mine. I am taking it. I am working to reintegrate Russian empire. Keep in mind that Putin has said on the record many times that he considers the dissolution of the Soviet Union to be the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. And he believes that it is his legacy to reverse that.
Russia unleashing an assault on Ukraine from multiple directions.
If Putin wins, he's going to be able to define the character of the world as one defined by brute force, not by the rule of law.